But some LPG terminals still provide a vapor return line as a safety measure, only to be used if tank pressures become excessive during loading. Take great care to avoid such events. To avoid contamination of shore tanks, any returned LPG may be flared. This can lead to disputes over the amount of cargo loaded. The relief valves of some ships have dual settings to allow higher tank pressures during loading than when at sea. Settings must only be changed by competent staff, and any change must be logged. High-pressure alarms must also be reset, and both must be returned to the seagoing settings before the ship departs. Loading begins. Now, and throughout the cargo operation, a close watch must be kept on flow rates, tank pressures, liquid levels, and temperatures. Their rates of change should also be carefully noted. If excess pressure threatens to lift relief valves, flow rates must be reduced or loading stopped. Sudden and extreme changes of temperature, flash cooling, can damage tanks and pipelines. To avoid this, pressurized ships start to load very slowly. Take care monitoring liquid levels. Boiling can create false readings. This can be suppressed by closing the tank's vapor suction for a few moments. An independent inspector will often be on board to report on the quantity and quality of the cargo.
Hello, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
I'm surveyor. I'm here to take samples.
But he's not there to manage the operation. That's the chief officer's job, and the master is ultimately responsible. An inspector is as prone to error as the next man, so it's essential to monitor his work. When you ask him to note a comment, he should do so. If he doesn't, log it instead, and make sure the ship owner is made aware.
When there's a list, it always gives problems. So
no, it's calculating in the calculations.
Okay. Do you have experience on that? Or? Okay.
All the trim and list is all corrected. This is the correct level here.
You have tables for this trim correction. 4.2.
If you don't agree with an inspector's interpretation of what he sees, try to reach a commercial solution. Always faster and cheaper than a legal dispute.
Thank you very much.
You are welcome, sir.
Okay, no problem. Bye.
If you can't come to an agreement, you must protest. Don't forget, the club is there to support you, usually with a correspondent on the spot.
Hello, this is Chief Officer of Coral Palmata speaking. Can I speak to Mr. Kethoven?
Towards the end of loading, make sure flow rates are reduced as agreed with the terminal, so that tanks can be topped off accurately.
Stuart, you'll soon be closing. Just stand by. Please let us know when it closes.
Manifold valves can then be closed and pipelines cleared of liquid and depressurized. Safe working practices require hard arms, hoses and pipelines at the manifold to be purged of vapor before disconnecting. Leaking valves and flanges have resulted in serious incidents. LPG and chemical gas risks include fire, explosion, and asphyxiation. The lower temperature of LNG causes structural damage to ships as well. Remember, check that all health, safety, environmental, and security measures are in place. Agree who will be responsible for what. Agree the cargo plan and sign it. Inspectors make mistakes, so monitor their work. If you can't come to an agreement, you must protest. The UK club will support you, usually with a correspondent on the spot. Throughout the loaded voyage, carry out charterer's instructions diligently and record that you've done so. All refrigerated and semi-pressurized gas carriers need to maintain strict control of cargo temperature and pressure. Many LPG cargoes are required to be discharged at a temperature below that of the shore tanks and must therefore be cooled. This isn't always straightforward. If condensed gas from the reliquefaction plant is returned to the top of a tank, the vapor pressure will quickly drop, but the liquid cargo will have cooled very little. To ensure proper circulation and cooling, the condensed gas should be returned to the bottom of the tank. Remember, inhibitors won't stop cargoes polymerizing in their vapor phase. For cargoes such as butadiene and vinyl chloride, select a suitable maximum discharge temperature for the compressor. Heavy weather can play havoc with cargo cooling. As the ship rolls, liquid cargo may enter the compressor via the vapor suction line and disable it. Check the liquid traps regularly and test the level alarms. If conditions disrupt cargo cooling, logging the fact can help defend any claims against the ship. If the cargo heater is to be used at the discharge port, testing it for leaks before arrival can save long and costly delays. On most LNG carriers, natural boil-off vapors aren't reliquefied. They're used to fuel the boilers, which generate steam for their turbine engines. But the amount of boil-off gas varies with air temperature and sea conditions. So a close watch must be kept on tank pressures. LNG terminals often specify a maximum tank pressure for arriving ships. On the other hand, to prevent the risk of creating a flammable mixture of gas and air, tank pressure must never fall below atmospheric. Whatever the type of ship and cargo, be sure to log the care you've taken. If a claim occurs, good records can be the best defense. Remember, carry out charterer's instructions diligently. Log the care you've taken with cargo. Good records are the best defense against claims. Making sure that the ship arrives with the specified cargo tank temperatures and pressures helps achieve maximum discharge rates.
Manifold draining. So once we finish our side draining...
Before discharging, ship and shore staff will meet to agree on all operational and safety procedures to be followed.
Cables,
Cable?
okay. Yeah,
No
that's,
problem.
yes, just before
At
sailing.
the end of this conditioners.
Okay.
Okay? This conditioner, a little bit.
Discharging and ballasting must be carefully controlled to maintain stability and minimize hull stress. Tank pressures tend to fall during cargo operations, slowing the rate of discharge.
When you're clear, let us know. We'll start the test. All okay on tank one?
To prevent pressures falling, vapor can be added to the tank, generally from the terminal.
Cargo engineer is coming out there.
The cargo tanks which are loaded are number 1.
Number 1, number 2 port, and starboard.
Okay.
Cooperate with any independent inspector, but remember, it's the chief officer's job to manage cargo operations.
Porting operations. Okay.
Make sure that the cargo is sampled properly and that its quality is accepted before discharge starts. If any dispute arises, contact the UK Club correspondent.
Refinery gate for lane.
To transfer refrigerated cargo into pressurized storage, it must first be warmed up using the ship's booster pump and cargo heater. The pump and heater must be cooled down slowly to avoid damage. So cargo must be introduced gradually. Seawater is the usual heat source, but it can easily freeze, halting cargo discharge and damaging the heater. To avoid this, never let the outlet temperature drop below the limits recommended by the manufacturer. Apart from a heel of liquefied gas retained on board to keep tanks cool on the ballast voyage and on LNG ships to be used as fuel, all the cargo has been transferred. Now the deck lines and hard arms must be drained, purged with nitrogen, depressurized and disconnected. Only then may the ship-shore connection be broken. Remember, agree operational and safety procedures with the terminal before discharging. Chief officers manage cargo operations, not inspectors. Contact the UK Club if any dispute arises. Unlike LNG ships, LPG and chemical gas ships may carry a variety of cargoes. If the next cargo isn't compatible with the previous one, it may be necessary for the tanks to be gas-freed. Depending on the cargo previously carried and the one that will follow it, this can involve as many as 4 steps. Removing leftover liquid cargo, warming the tanks, inerting, and finally, ventilating with air.
бордюра, начинаем зачистку третьего левого, закрывая его наполовину.
Принято, закрываем третий левый наполовину.
Different ships have different ways of removing leftover liquid cargo, but it must be done thoroughly. In a non-saturated environment, it evaporates vigorously, supercooling the tank to breaking point. At sea, cargo vapor may be vented. In port, you must store it aboard or pump it to a vapor recovery unit. If inert gas is pumped into a tank that's cold, any moisture or carbon dioxide may freeze. To avoid this, warm cargo vapors are circulated first. The rate of warm-up should be carefully controlled in accordance with the shipbuilder's guidance. Now the tank can be inerted if necessary, and always when it's to be opened for inspection. Inerting prevents the formation of a flammable mixture of cargo and oxygen when air is introduced. The remaining cargo vapor is sampled until its concentration is below its lower explosive limit. Finally, the tank may be ventilated with air if necessary. The tank must be at ambient temperature and the air dry, or else condensation will form. It will have to be removed, a long and costly job. Whatever the commercial pressures, nobody must enter a tank until tests for cargo vapors have been carried out and the level of oxygen is 21%. And don't overlook carbon monoxide. When the oxygen level's okay,